Hi, my name is Louise Clark, and today I want to cover what I'm calling the Great Cover-Up. I made a blog about a week or so ago explaining it all, and I put it all on my website. I do like little blog posts here and there. So I made a blog of it, but it hasn't really got much viewing, which is not really surprising because everything I do gets hidden. But I really do feel an urgent need to cover the topic and to be heard, and so if it can't be heard on my website, then maybe I needed to do it as a video, I decided. Now the thing is, I wrote it and then it's like, to remember everything I wrote in there is a completely different thing, and it's a sunny day, so I'd rather be out there painting, so that's what I was doing. So what I thought I'd do is read out the blog and then expand on where I've written it. Now meanwhile, if you wanted to read just the blog, it's at higherinsight.co.uk, and the post is called Here's the Thing, the Great Cover-Up. So let me start. I'm going to have to put my glasses on. I've got double vision, don't worry. Here's the thing. Because I'm programmed with many me's, some know things that other me's don't. Those things known are shared with me, but I often therefore don't have evidence, but I know that they are correct. So trust what they say. But those people who need evidence, I don't have it. The thing is, there is evidence. There is evidence of what I know, and that's what I'm trying to say there, is like parts of me know things that are planned for the future, and that is why there's an urgency on making this for the awareness of people, because we're going to lose all these freedoms as far as that side of me understands. But so there is evidence out there, but for me to go and find all that evidence, it's like that's all going to be time consuming, and what I know is the clock is ticking. So I see it as, look, if you want to accept what I say, then that's fine. If you don't want to accept, then if you seek that evidence, then you will find it. But I don't want to spend time looking for it, so I'll never end up making this video, as you see. So that's basically, in the first paragraph, is what I say. Now the cover-up, I could do it without the glasses. The cover-up is a denial of D.I.D. Since forever till now. And the thing is, D.I.D., which used to be known as multiple personality disorder, has been around in America for a while, probably 80s, 90s. We had Sybil, didn't we, that film? And now they're sort of keen on showing all multiple personalities. Mickey Ninja, I don't know her name, Nicki Ninja, I don't know. Right, Minaj, right, Beyonce, I think she's got an altered ego. So that's all introducing you to having other personalities, and it all looks trendy-wendy, doesn't it? It all looks exciting, and children can say, oh yeah, I can do that, I can have a Sasha Fierce and all that. But really what it is all about is, it's not them expressing themselves, it's about a massive cover-up. Because D.I.D., used to be known as multiple personality disorder, it's been around since the beginning of time. It's been around, I might not need this, it's been around from the beginning of time, because basically if you traumatize someone to extreme, then there's a point where they have to just cut off from what's happening. Now if they don't cut off, they could go crazy, or they could, in torture, die. But if they switch off, then they somehow survive because another them takes part. Now that is what constitutes dissociative identity disorder, D.I.D. As I say, for a long while America has sort of accepted it, and in Britain, which is where I am, UK, they were reluctant to accept it existed. And so they were, oh, that's the Americans, they believe in anything, we don't. But then in recent times they're starting to recognise D.I.D. But the thing is, that's the cover, because really what psychology I've said in there 200 years old. It's probably about 150. It's not old. It's not really been around long. Science hasn't been around that long, maybe a couple of 100 years, maybe 300 at the most. So science is psychology. Psychology does all the measuring scientifically. They know that when you traumatise a person that they don't remember and all that. So they know about these things, but they've hidden it. And what they've done is when someone is splitting off and making other personalities, they're not calling it that. They're not recognising that till now. They'll call it, oh, you hear voices, oh, you're schizophrenic, oh, you're depressed, oh, it's something, take these tablets, where the truth is a bit larger than that. So let me see what I've written here. So it says the cover-up, denial of D.I.D. since forever till now. Psychology knew it occurred, for sure, but labelled signs of everything other. Psychology as a science is only 200 years old, maybe even less. Yet the psychology professionals go on like they know. It's the same for doctors when they don't. Not really, as it's far more complex than they would like. And then I go on to say I did psychology, because I did psychology degree in 1989, so that made me a psychologist, and it was a BSc Honours I got in East London University. Before I had a degree in psychology, I was the same person, and I'd learned in life to read people, but as soon as I had a degree and said I was a psychologist, then everyone acts like, oh, you're going to read me, you're going to analyse me, because it's all sort of kept separate, especially from the working classes, which is where I'm from, is if you've got a degree and then you must be really, really clever, because it's a delusion. No, it means that you got funding in my times, or you're from wealthy parents. It doesn't mean you're really, really clever, but because they create this them and us of like, yeah, they're really, really clever, and then it's in psychology, or you did a doctor's degree, oh, you must be really clever, and therefore you know everything. When in truth, when I did psychology, I thought I was going to come out knowing everything, and what I learned is I learned nothing. Not really. I learned how to understand statistics. I learned how science is used and abused. I learned how science studies psychological aspects of life. But I didn't come out being able to mind read like you think that people would. The same as a doctor doesn't come out knowing everything about health, but we're taught in society to respect those professionals, and they know best, the scientists know best, the psychologists know best, the doctors know best, when they don't. So that's also what I sort of briefly outlined in a paragraph there. So then I go on. Now when I did psychology, they didn't teach us about D.I.D. They didn't teach us about multiple personality disorder. They didn't teach them aspects. We did learn some things, but we didn't learn that. So then when it sees in those that govern media, psychology are now throwing out crumbs, this is what I've written here, to the public, like narcissism and cognitive dissonance. And it is. And when we did that, we did study cognitive dissonance, but it was like a really small thing about where you have conflict, and then if you have conflict over something, then the one that's giving you the most conflict, you'll go that way. But they've now, I see, throwing out on YouTube, it's like, here is everything you need to know about a narcissist, or everything you need to know about cognitive dissonance. And it's like, they're just like crumbs, because you have to have them in context, especially in context to this D.I.D. cover-up, because there's more to it. And you might find that a hell of a lot of people are sometimes narcissistic, because they may have alters those personalities, separate personalities that are narcissistic to cope with life, and then other times they may not be. So are they narcissists or not? So this is where it gets a bit more complicated, but they're letting the people, psychology, deliberately letting the people think that they understand it all now and they've grasped it, and there they go. So where are we up to? So this is those that govern media, which is like TV and everything you get, and newspapers, those that govern media psychology are now throwing crumbs to the public like narcissism and cognitive dissonance, which was just a tiny topic we studied. Well, I've just told you that, they put them in to explain, blah, 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 blah. The truth is not said. and that is that the Tavistock, funded by the Rockefellers since I think 1912, 1914, was set up to study and control the masses through trauma. And this is true. I think it was 1912, but don't quote me on it. But again, it's like if I started around trying to study it and find out when it started. But in my memory and inside me, it says 1912 it started. They programmed Hitler. You'll have to look for that. And this is the Tavistock. They were funded by the Rockefellers and others, which are not poor people. So they funded the Tavistock Institute, and they've got Tavistock things all over the world. So you've got Tavistock Institute, Tavistock clinics, but they're all part of, they all come under the same thing, really. So now when they set up in 1912, the purpose of setting it up was to study mass mind control. So what they did was funded the First World War, because that's who we're dealing with. Now again, I can't prove it, but I bet you somewhere online will prove it. So they did the First World War to study mass trauma, to study the masses, how they respond to trauma. Then they did the Second World War. So again, they didn't learn enough on trauma. But by this time of pandemic, scandemic, whatever we want to call it, definitely they understand the effects of trauma and lockdown and all them things. So they knew what they were doing. And the thing is, yes, they didn't close down the Tavistock. They've been going years. So as I say, they programmed people like Hitler in 1912, and then he went off to Germany and set up the Second World War, apparently. And I don't know, because I didn't get to learn any history when I was at school. I got 2% for history. It wasn't for me to learn history, it seems. So then other people like Angela Davis, programmed by the Tavistock, Bob Marley, involved in the Tavistock, the Beatles was a Tavistock engineered exercise. So when you start seeing how grand the Tavistock and how they orchestrate many things, then you see. Now the thing is, they're not really talking about it. I say to people who are even knowledgeable about the Tavistock, and they go, who's the Tavistock? So in that blog, I've also put a video of one of the Tavistock books. It's an audio of their book, the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations. And in there they talk about how their plans for the future, and they wrote it years ago. So if you listen to it, or if you go and read the book, then you'll see that what I'm saying is true, and that they planned all these things, and you'll see how they planned. So behind everything is the planning from the Tavistock. They sort of plan all the psychological operations. So like when they wanted women to smoke, when the suffragettes were around, they got a few suffragettes. I've written it here, Edward Barnay, which I think he was related to Freud, one of their little favourites. And they went to him because he was quite good at media control and psychological control. How are we going to get women to smoke cigarettes? So what they did was got a group of well-to-do ladies in their frocks, and they all had a fag at the suffragette movement. And then, because that gave off a strong, independent women, look, we're smoking, right? So then that started all the women that wanted to identify with those suffragettes to start smoking, and away they went. So that was a Tavistock engineered operation. That was back then in the suffragette time, probably about 1912, 1914. So therefore, that's how long they've been going on. Now, when it's we look at the next thing, now we're knowing that they are into they knowing that if we traumatize people, they separate off. If we put the whole world in mass trauma, says the Tavistock Institute, then how will they respond? They respond in shock. And in the Second World War, they did loads of experiments in the name of the Nazi camps, and they were doing all tests on mind control to see the effects of different types of trauma, how people respond, so they studied it. And so really the Second World War was a war to study an experiment on guinea pigs, the effects of trauma-based mind control. So they learned them good. After the war, then they had this Project Paperclip, you might come across, where they shipped all the Nazis that have been doing all the research, and they shipped them all around the world to America and so forth, Canada, everywhere, South America. And there was a big famous one, Mengele, and he went everywhere. He studied twins in Brazil, and you get lots of twins. I'm from a lot of twins. My mother was a twin, and so was my father a twin. Funny that. So often when they do breed up twins, they get rid of one of the twins because they believe that if you get one of the twins to die in the womb, then the one in the womb will take the spirit of the one that died. So my dad's twin died in the womb where my mum's twin lived. So they grew up together. Right. So yeah, I wanted to give you more. So basically it'll be called trauma-based mind control or government-based mind control. And the thing is, this is what really is. It's not D.I.D. So what's happening is now, because of the internet, I believe, and because if you do these traumas to people, a lot of the time, if you don't reinforce the trauma will break down, the barriers will break down between the different personalities and leak through, and therefore the person will start to be having memories, dreams, flashbacks that are things that they're not aware of. And so with that, initially you had like the Sybils and that, and as I say, America, where England's like, no, it didn't happen, it must be a past life, it must be all different things, but it can't be that. So basically, we wasn't accepting it in this country, but now we are, it seemed, and we seem to be getting bombarded with the concept of D.I.D, and even Batman now, in the movie, I'm going to ruin it for you, the new movie out, they think he's mad. They think he's mad, and by the end you realise he's not, he's D.I.D. So there you go. But obviously all those superheroes are D.I.D. because they all switch, which is what we call when you turn from one personality to another. But then we also know that, well, created trauma-based mind-controlled slaves by the governments can switch from one identity to another, and they are trained to do things like assassinations and espionage and trafficking, and people are used in trafficking without even being aware that they're used in trafficking, because they think they go to sleep at night and then they wake up and they don't know that they was doing things through the night. They also do like what do you call it, like long distance, what do we call it, like you go astral viewing, remote viewing. So now you'll see people making videos on remote viewing, because really I think, yeah, talk about remote viewing, don't talk about trafficking of children, don't talk about trafficking of women, men, drugs, arms, don't talk about trafficking of body parts, don't talk about trafficking of anything. Just talk about things that people can get their heads around, like, oh yeah, astrally projecting myself and connecting and going on these planes, which you can do. But there's also trafficking going on all through the night. And it's of your children, my children, our families. And we don't even know. So, because what they're doing is disguising what they're up to, and now because it's coming out, and people are talking about it, they're going, oh, what it is it's D.I.D. So now they're opening the public up to D.I.D. So when it comes to diagnosing, I mean, we've got these diagnostic manuals in psychology where they call them DSM, blah, 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 right? And they make little boxes that they can fit psychological complications, problems in. So we've got these different psychological descriptions of what fits in. So you have got the D.I.D. in there, and the Tavistock will be behind the creating. And what you will see is, as things become, like now, you've got a lot of people becoming aware that they're being gang stalked, watched, followed, interfered with in their life. And when they try to express it, if they go to the police, they're like made to shun them. And if they go anywhere near psychiatry, and that's where the police would direct them, bring them, take them to the doctor, take them to the nurse. And then when they start describing them things, they've now made a mental illness where people who believe that they're being targeted in any way by the government or by any group, that's a mental illness, that's paranoid delusion, but they've got a new name for it in gang stalking. So anything that comes forward, they're starting to cover with new titles. So this is why I'm calling it the cover up. So D.I.D, as I say, was there from the beginning of time, because trauma's been there from the beginning of time. So don't tell me they never knew it was there, but they do. Like they know that gang stalking goes on, but they're not giving people a voice. They're not giving people an avenue to even report it, because if you report it, as I say, to the police, then you will need to see a doctor or a nurse. If you report it to a doctor or a nurse, you'll be diagnosed with some mental health illness, because no one's got the capacity to investigate it. When I first learned of it all back in the in the 90s, no one, I mean, I witnessed social services covering up trafficking of the child. I witnessed police helping to cover the trafficking of the child. I took it to Tony Blair, who was a Prime Minister, and he wrote back saying it's carefully noted. You can see online what I wrote to him, and that's all he's got to say, carefully noted. I CC'd it to, what's the guy, the Health Minister, David Blunkett. No, he didn't. He just deferred me elsewhere. I CC'd it to MI5. They said, oh, if you think you're being tapped, they picked out just about the tapping of the phone. If you think you're being tapped, right to the something, interception of communications or something. I did that. They've got a list of all the organisations, and they say, who, this was back in about 2000, who do you think is tapping you? So you have to tick the boxes, like fishing industry. There was all different ones. Well, you don't know who's tapping you. You're telling them they can intercept and have a look. There are people that can look and see who exactly is tapping you and where it's from. But instead, no, they told me I've got to tell them who's tapping me. So I said everyone, I ticked every box. But I didn't really get anywhere, right? Which is why I put it online. Now, therefore, they build a diagnosis around that, but it was all based on evidence. So, but the thing is, as I say, who do you take the evidence to? You can't take it to the police. You can't take it to the Prime Minister. You can't take it to MI5, because really they know what's going on, carefully noted, because there's many involved. I mean, people know that the police are involved, but what happens is they'll say, oh, the police are involved, but why can't you? But if you speak to the police, some people do, and like that have knowledge like me, and they'll say, no, the police do know what's going on, but it's so big they can't speak out against it. They can't go against the ones that are involved in it, because the ones who are involved in it are more powerful. And yes, it would tie into Freemasonry, and it may be that ones that are in Freemasons, because once you're a Freemason, you've got to do what the Freemasons tell you to do. Now, the police are Freemasons, but as you go higher, they're Freemasons. And when we're looking at who the traffickers and the police and all that, and the medical professions are all under, it's under Freemasonry, it's under the Illuminati, which is Freemasonry. And then they talk online of like, oh, is the Illuminati over? Or is it still? No, it never stopped. No, it got annoyed. It annoyed people, and so they had to hide. But they still run things. So they still run the police, they still run the military, they still run governments. And therefore the governments are just puppets, like Mr. Boris, he's just a puppet. And when you get annoyed with him, they can replace him with another puppet. And he's just got strings, because the powers that be are higher than him. They're higher than your governments, because the governments go to a higher government, which is run with the Illuminati and the people that you're here, the Council 300, is it? There's numerous names, and they all interlinked, because it's like Illuminati, but they're Masons. The highest Masons is the Knights of Malta, and the Knights of Malta the Queen's in charge of. Then all women can't be free. Yes, they can. Freemason women is the Eastern Star. teenage Freemason girls is the rainbow girls, and that's where the gay flag comes from. But people think the gay flag is about, oh, it's gay people and it hasn't got pink in it because that's a pink. The gay people in the Nazi camps had to wear pink triangles. So, no, it's not. The reason the flag is like that without pink is because the Rainbow Girls have got a flag. Check out the Rainbow Girls and Teenage Freemasons. So people are waving the flag of the female Freemasons. This is why I wrote it, because if I talk too much. But I just decided I will, because I'm sort of sick of things, to be honest. So yeah. Where are we up to? Well, I'll tell you why. Right, so they say, why are they putting them in the movies, I'd said. So I said, I'll tell you why. It's because these labels are created to cover what is really going on in the world of trafficking. Trafficking is more sinister than you can ever imagine, and it's not only done in the ways that they show through the media they have now. No, again, it's like D.I.D. Because this is the other thing, is now I'm seeing they're like, oh, let's talk to these girls that are being trafficked. Oh yes, we're recognising the trafficking. But these are people that are aware they're being trafficked. And that, I feel they're covering trafficking now. It's a cover-up, because there's a hell of a lot of people that aren't aware they're being trafficked. And even those that are aware they're trafficked, they're not necessarily aware they're trafficked other times of the day, usually at night. Usually between the hours of about 3 and 4 p.m. They will be trafficked, they will be taken wherever they need to be taken, they will be returned, and they will think they slept through the night. They may find marks on them, they may not. I have marks on me, but they don't have to mark you. It's a choice. And so if you are a good girl and do everything they want, you won't get any marks necessarily, although it depends on what you're being used for. If you're being used to fight, you might get a couple of bruises. But you're not getting paid for it. You're not consenting to it. It's against your will. So what's happening is they are covering themselves by talking about trafficking when they're not talking about the true trafficking that goes on with people that are D.I.D, or should we say government-controlled, mind-controlled slaves. There's no one to complain to. So they've learned and mastered how to create these amnesic walls between the different personalities that are created through the trauma. They know how to maintain them walls, and they know how to call up them personalities that have been traumatised, and then train them from childhood, from birth, to behave in the way they want them to behave, to have the personalities that they want them to have. And they'll suppress the personalities they don't want you to have. It's like me, genetically, I'm sort of very good with maths, very good with deduction. My dad was a really good gambler, and therefore they pushed me without my awareness, but when I was meant to be at school, then they pushed me in mathematical things, and then after the sessions they would test my IQ, test my aptitude to see had they increased it. All my medical files are very tampered with, and there's hardly any left in them nowadays. But what is in them is an IQ test they did of me at age 3. It says I've got an IQ of 130 then, but they would have pushed it. And to get to the level of programming that I have, which is a computer in my brain sense, I'm told that you need an IQ of 180 to achieve that. I know if I do an IQ test, I'll have about 140, but I also know that they will separate the personalities, the alters in the person, that they will keep the cream for themselves. So the person who's talking here, which is the host, which is me, will have the IQ of 140, but the ones that they will use elsewhere can have the IQ of 180, and I won't.